Hey guys, so I wanted to make this quick video on the 5 things that science cannot prove. And if you're currently taking a biology class or a science class, maybe even a philosophy class, this is a great piece of knowledge to put in your back pocket when you're in these classes, or maybe just talking to different people out in the real world. It really helps you think a little bit harder and helps you grasp more things and realize that science actually does not hold the keys to all knowledge. The first big one is mathematics. Mathematics is something science uses. It's something that science is dependent upon to do its theories, to do its experiments. And so there is no way for science to prove math without using math, if that makes any sense. Science is dependent, therefore, on mathematical theory and its accuracy. Therefore, science cannot prove mathematics. Secondly, logic. Logic is, the basis of all knowledge. It's the basis of us understanding each other. If a sentence that we utter is not in a logical order, then you're not going to be able to understand me. So logic is yet another example of something science uses and is dependent upon to do their experiments, to craft their theories. And so therefore logic is yet another great item that science has nothing to say about. You cannot do an experiment and prove that something is logical, because you would have to use logic in order to do the experiment, if that makes sense. The third one is metaphysics. You may have heard this term, may not understand it. Very briefly, metaphysics is basically the study of things of the unknown, things that are not quite maybe sure, things that are undiscovered. An example of this would have been, before we discovered that the Earth was a sphere, and many thought it was flat. The long-held opinion was that the Earth was flat. And so when we discovered that the Earth was a sphere, it's not like the Earth became a sphere. The Earth was already a sphere. We just discovered that it was a sphere. Even though we thought it was flat, the Earth never was flat, and never did it become a sphere. It was always a sphere. So that's the study of metaphysics. Things of the unknown are true now, even though we might not know them to be true. The next one I would bring up is morals. And this might be, one that some people disagree with, but nonetheless, it's not something that you can say does not exist. Science has no say on morality. They might try to throw out there that there's evolutionary adaptations or socio byproducts of evolution that is the reason why certain people, feel things or whatever. But if you take a long, hard look and do some of your own research on what objective morals are, is something really right, is something really wrong, you will quickly see that science has no comment and is silent on the idea of morality. And so therefore there is no experiment you can do to test, is something really good, is something really right. One great thing I read, I can't remember what book, was just an example of self-sacrifice. An example of something that was truly good. It was a story of a man who was a diver or worked on the Coast Guard in a helicopter. He jumped into a freezing cold ocean and saved 5 or 6 people or 7 people, I can't remember how many people. But the last person he saved cost him his own life. And I think anybody with any conscience at all would have to agree that such acts are truly good acts and truly objectively wonderful and objectively good in nature. And on the flip side, I would say that things such as those that what Adolf Hitler did, who I might add was a staunch evolutionist, a staunch Darwinist. If you read his book Mein Kampf, that will become clear. And Adolf Hitler, the things he did on that side of the coin also, you'd have to be a flip side to say that roasting people in a gas chamber is not objectively wrong. And so these are things that science absolutely cannot say one way or another if these things are objectively right or objectively wrong. There's no experiment, there's no test tube we can throw into the mix to determine if something is objectively right or objectively wrong. It's something that lies within our own conscience. The next thing I would say is aesthetics, which is the study of beauty. Is something beautiful or is it not? Now this is kind of a subjective one, you might say, but nonetheless there are things that are truly remarkably gorgeous and things that are hideous to look at. An example, could be like I just brought up, like maybe the stink of hundreds of rotting corpses from the Nazi regime after the Americans broke through and found some of these camps. If you read the stories, the stink was just unreal. The sight was unbearable. But then if you think about different things like, the birth of a newborn, looking out over a mountaintop, say in Colorado Springs, and viewing the gorgeous scenery that, makes up the terrain there. I mean, so clearly it would be hard to argue that some things are not very or obviously gorgeous and some things are not obviously horrific to look at. And so aesthetics is something that produces a fact within our own minds. And again, science has no comment on this issue. You cannot deduct any type of experiment. You cannot conduct any kind of experiment to determine if something is gorgeous or not. And so those are the 5 main ones. One I would add that is obviously a still developing one is that of the mind and the soul and the body argument. And regardless as to if we ever come to terms with that argument, I would say that Thomas Nagel's great question as to what it's like to be a bat is yet another thing science will never be able to tell us, which you can of course ask that question about virtually any living creature, including yourself. You can say, well, what is it like to be me? What's it like to be Wes? I mean, nobody knows what it's like to be me other than me. You can dissect my whole body, you can cut me apart, you can put every microscope down my throat and down my ears, and you're never going to know what it's like to be me. And so that holds true for every person in the world. I mean, you cannot look at another person. You might see that their hair's brown, their skin's white or dark or red, whatever, but you will never understand what it is truly like to be that person. And if you start thinking about different animals, it gets even more complicated because certain animals, as a bat, do not even have the same kind of sensory perceptions or knowledge of the world or conscious awareness as humans do. So it becomes even infinitesimally more difficult to think in those terms. So these are really 6 great things that you can throw right back at the professors, at the science lovers who have those closed minds, because often Christians and believers are touted as having closed minds, but in my experience it certainly far outweighs the side of the scientific community. When you start encroaching on some of their beloved theories such as evolution, they are very, very, very defensive, And I will add, just the other day, I was at a college library here in my hometown, and I couldn't believe, and this is in Kansas City, the Midwest, you know, where a lot of people think it's the Bible Belt. Not at the colleges. I went to my local college here at JCCC. I was trying to find just one book on intelligent design, just one book. There's several out there. I mean, several have been written, and many of them are by, you know, people with PhDs, very smart people out there. And yet I found zero books. So even if I just want to think about this theory or read about or hear about it, I can't even read about it even when I'm at my college. But yet I found 102 books supporting the theory of evolution. Now, if you ask me, that's just a little bit of information suppression. What do they have to worry about? If evolutionary theory is so correct, so supported, why is it a big deal if there's even one book in the library that possibly challenges it? I mean, it's just unbelievable how the scientific community blindly follows one after the next these ideas that have come into being, and it seems as though if you don't accept those theories, if you don't accept the mainstream scientific community thought, then you are an outcast and you don't do science. But I think with the 5 or 6 things I gave